Hi, good morning, good evening, depending on the place you are joining from. ECOI is very happy to be a partner of this COE SA Conclave. I am Dr. Rashmi Agrawal, retired as Director from Government of India. I am a co-leader of Evaluation Community of India and member of various other evaluation networks. I now work as an independent monitoring and evaluation consultant. Our panel's topic is directly related to the theme of the conclave. That is, our presenters will share their experiences from the field on evaluation in crisis situations and their pros and cons. I welcome all the presenters and participants for this panel discussion. I hope it is going to be a very lively discussion. In situations of conflict, crisis, and pandemics, it becomes extremely difficult to conduct evaluations in their normal manner because of problems in communication, outreach, and context, etc. The recent outbreak of COVID and its impact on people in their lives has brought out the difficulties in conducting evaluation in terms of processes as well as methods. But the evaluation community has displayed adequate resilience and developed innovative ideas that led to solutions to the problems. Before we start the session, I would like to tell some of the modalities. Please introduce yourself in the chat box. I request you all to please keep your audio and video in off mode and also your mobiles in silent mode. The structure of the session will be like this. Each panelist will be given about 15 to 20 minutes for presentation, and after all the presentations are over, the floor will be open for taking up questions from the participants. You are requested to send your questions indicating towards whom it is directed to, and you can send these questions in the chat box. Today, we have excellent panel of experts drawn from different areas of experience and organizations. We have Ratna Mathur, Anirudh Brahmachari, Rekan Charla, and Sanchita Ghosh. I will introduce them in details as I go along. So first of all, I request Ratna Mathur to start the first presentation. Ratna is a social development professional. Her area of work mainly relates to the gender and inclusion. She had been working as senior leader with Sir Dorabji Tata Trust and Care India. She is working on partnership buildings in teams. I welcome you, Ratna. Over to you. And when you want me to change the slides, so please tell me.
Yes.
Indicate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi ji, for putting together such an interesting panel. And I also would like to express my thanks to the evaluation community of India and South Asia, as well as to Sambodhi and ISST for this opportunity. The topic that I would be speaking on today is called Assessing from Below. And I would be sharing about how COVID enabled rural women to transform priorities and evaluations with participatory practices. Next, please. Rashmi ji? Yeah. So I'm kind of, taking a very top-line analytical view here and not going into the details of data or of, methodologies. And essentially, I want to introduce the work of Swayam Shikshan Prayog, which is based out of Maharashtra, but also working in Odisha, Bihar, Kerala, and they've worked in other states. The essential focus of the organization has been on working with the climate risk communities. And the model that they work with is women focused. And so we will be trying to understand, what happened during the COVID crisis and how the multiple challenges which the farmers were already facing in a drought affected area, how they got escalated, and how the local solutions that the women found were the key to the kind of resilience that they were able to build. Next, please. So for SSP, the way that resilience is traditionally designed is that, how you can go back to the original functions and structural properties. SSP kind of tried to kind of extend that definition and say that we want to build forward better with better gender relationships, more rights for women, more ability to function, and more participation in this process. So we are, in that sense, looking at a crisis as a new opportunity, and this is also based on SSP's background, because the organization was started in 1993 after the Latur earthquake. And from 2012 onwards, a series of recurring droughts in that area, forced the organization to kind of pivot its strategies and work more with women and step out of the kind of chemical-based agriculture that they were doing. So their focus is very much on agroecology and looking at climate-sensitive approaches to agriculture. And one of the main things has been building the leadership of women to be recognized as farmers and to be recognized as community leaders. Next, please. So the way I have analyzed the information available is based on several endline studies done during 2020 to 22. These are spanning the core areas of SSP's work in Maharashtra, primarily in 4 districts of Marathwada. And I also had access to several of the COVID-related project reports, and I myself had supported the organization in working on WASH, COVID, and women's leadership projects, for which I was part of a process with UNICEF and with the Humanity Foundation. So we are looking at an organization which has already worked to promote women's collectives related to livelihoods, related to agri-entrepreneurship. And it had built a network of what they call sakhis to be part of a decision-making process. And all of them being small and marginal farmers with less than 5 acres of land. In fact, about 90% of their constituency, the women have about 2 acres of land and even less. So building a network, building alternate livelihoods, building a lot of internal capacities was a very important process, which had already been started from 2014 onwards, to face the recurring droughts. And recently they also had the a cycle of floods. So drought in the summer months and then followed by floods. And this has happened for 4 years running in these areas. So there had already been a lot of distress in the area. And when the COVID lockdown happened, they also had a huge population of people from other states who were passing through from Maharashtra to their home states, as well as returned migrants, people who were from their own landless labor who was coming back from the urban centers. We'll go to the next slide now. And to understand what was the original operational framework and what was the process through which women's leadership and the whole process of building more gender equity and having more women come into public leadership, how that was established. If you see in the graphic, on the bottom are the pink boxes, which are all the variety of community-based organizations that had been promoted, and many of them are also part of the government system, which SSP was working with. The inputs that were coming, to the women, and how that whole process of input changed during COVID. On the left side, you will see the boxes of the inputs coming from the organization on climate resilient farming, on entrepreneurship, skill development, and their flagship leadership program called Women's Initiative to Learn and Lead. Now, being a Shikshan-based organization, when COVID happened, then they had to learn very fast. And this also coincided with my involvement, which is why I have this perspective here. We were developing their leadership indicators at this time in late 2019 and early 2020, which were related to gender empowerment processes there with their foundational indicators as well as knowledge building system level indicators. So during COVID, the pink boxes at the bottom became the core way in which the entire crisis was led by the women, and it had to be led. And once that process got triggered for the women, then there is no going back. You're not retreating back into your homes. And if you saw the earlier definition, so this is how it kind of shaped out. So here in this slide, you will see that how these indicators got adapted. A lot of the process was internal at that time because there were no external evaluations, formal external evaluations happening. And we were already socializing a self-assessment, kind of an attitudinal survey at that time, which kind of really helped in the process of, letting the organization put the women on a fast track of community leadership. So the left side box gives the type of indicators on self-management, relationship management, result orientation, and the kind of collective leadership through the networks that they were forming. On the right-hand side top box, you will see that that the number of trained women leaders, who were the block leaders, came into their own during COVID. And they were highly supported, of course, by the team and by the entire process, the entire enabling environment which the SSP team had set up. And here I would like to kind of put in a word about the organization itself and the way it was visioned by Prema Gopalan, who was their founder. Unfortunately, she passed away towards the tail end of the COVID in March 2022. So she was not able to see some of the things, but the team, the senior team, led by Naseem Sheikh, Upmanyu Patil, Gigi Sebastian, and many others, and including a very proactive board, they have been taking forward the process. In the column on the right, you will see village action groups. Now, these village action groups are the ones who are mostly those who are, community leaders who have come into a formal fold of leadership, and they are on a kind of a track of moving into leadership positions and as well as in management positions in the organization, in all the various 15-20 projects that the organization is implementing in these 4 districts. I've focused on these 4. There are many others where things have happened. So during these last 2 years, if you see the next box, many of the women came into action. They may have been already members of these various government mandated committees, or they were already frontline workers, but they became active and they worked very closely with the frontline workers. And this shift from women being not even recognized as farmers, being recognized as farmers, say by the year 2018-19 within their communities, and then during COVID in 2020, becoming community leaders and becoming the voice of the people, in the governance system, being part of the committees and, being part of the discussions with the BDOs on the way how the entire process of the relief would happen, how the needs would be assessed, how would the inclusion of all the communities who were left out, because COVID kind of inverted the entire process of who is the leader, who is the decision maker. So here the women, the community leaders definitely became the decision makers. They became the facilitators for the government system to function. So a lot of the relationships, the traditional relationships, got shifted. And while it cannot all remain at the same high pitch level as COVID, but certainly some changes have been internalized. So can we see the next slide, where we are seeing how the assessment process, makes it transformative. And during the COVID crisis, how, even the CSR donors were able to recognize this process. So I think the most significant changes that we saw were at the level of the women themselves and at the level of donors, who, instead of only looking at outputs, how many acres converted to organic farming or how many women have joined the dairy cooperative, I mean, they started looking at cognitive changes, at perceptual and relationship changes and aspirations of women. And this I've extracted from an inline evaluation done for Shapurji Palonji group, which was supporting a 3-year process with SSP. When we go to the next slide, please. I'm trying to, in the next slide, we try to kind of analyze what were these experiences here. And if you see the middle boxes, I'm sorry, the alignment seems to have shifted a little bit. The local collaborative approaches, alignment with the government system. These were, the main changes which happened and which the women themselves experienced, because they were not dealing, on a usual basis when they are farmers and they're looking at agriculture inputs. They're looking at agriculture extension, but they were not looking at being part of a governance process of decision making. So these were the two key things which they shared with me, when I have been interacting with them, that this is what kind of changed for them, of being, able to, make changes, of being able to participate in management. And this was the key to the entire process. Last slide, please, Rashmi ji. Yes. So these are the key learnings that we can draw for the larger evaluation community, because I firmly believe that the evaluation committee bridges the process of looking at what is happening on the ground and how planning is done and how policies get made, what we acknowledge, what we recognize, has a great influence on how things can move forward. So, and I'm really happy that, the keynote speakers on the inaugural day also noted this, that shifting of the perspective of assessment. A lot of the self-assessment, the rapid need assessment surveys, all the things that you do during an emergency, most of them were led by women, and that gave them a tremendous confidence. And I think that's where, respecting women's work, respecting the inclusive approaches, which really work, recognizing the intersectionalities, because they're not a blanket group of, a homogeneous group of women. There are many, many layers, and the women themselves recognized it. And I think this, for me, has been the most satisfying part of my involvement, because the social inclusion and the feminist approaches that I was pushing for, just came to be internalized and accepted during COVID, because, that's the way things shaped up. So I feel that, we need to formally recognize and put it into our frameworks whenever we design those tools, and, hear those voices, understand the feedback which is coming, overcome our own biases, overcome the biases of people who are in leadership positions. I think the other big learning is, and I'll close with that, which is that the system level collaborations, because we are quite satisfied with micro level changes, and, how many women, how many farmers, etc. But the system level shifts are the ones which are determining how things happen, how policies get shaped. When the next crisis happens, what would be the protocols which would be designed, who would be the decision makers. So for us as an evaluation community, I think measuring and internalizing and sharing the wisdom that the communities have on working with the system, I think that needs to be deployed. And a lot of creative concurrent monitoring system or all kinds of systems can be put in place. And we do have the tools. There are enough tools available, and which and we did fairly extensive research to be able to find things which work. So I'll stop here now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratna, for excellent presentation of the impact of pandemic on the livelihoods of rural women and how the participatory approaches during the disruptions caused by the pandemic that led to advancing women's self-awareness and agency. And they also motivated a process of self-evaluation. Thanks once again. We will come back to you with the questions. So our next speaker is Anirudh Brahmachari. He has vast experience working with various national and international organizations in the field of development and evaluation. At present, he is associated with Kriya University. He is co-leader of Evaluation Community of India, board member of APPEA and IOCE. He is a very proactive member of ECOI, let me tell, and I welcome you, Anirudh, and invite you to share your experiences. Anirudh will be speaking about gender justice program, which is very interesting. Let us hear Anirudh. Over to you, Anirudh.
Thank you, Rashmi ji. And let me also tell that Rashmi ji has also been a party to a lot of things which we have done in the field, in at least based on from the ECOI banner in India. And she has been a long, good journey person with me as we have gone along in this developing field. Thank you, Rashmi ji. And also it's very nice to speak about this program. So just a background before I move on to the first slide. We at IWAGE and Kriya University support the national government program, which is the NRLM, which is the National Rural Development, Rural Livelihoods Program. Rashmi, stay on the first thing. That's fine. I will tell you when. So, that NRLM program goes out to all the states, and it actually goes up till the community level. Last unit in the whole process is the SHG groups which are created.
Anirudh, your voice is very low. Okay. Can you help with your speaker?
Yeah. It's probably two mics are on. You can put off one.
Yeah. So I have, can you hear me now clearly?
Yeah, better. Yeah, okay.
Certainly better. Yeah.
Okay. So that basically has been the process that NRLM program is reaching out to. It's a government program reaching out to the last SHG groups in a lot of vast across the country. So today we have around 78 lakh SHG groups in the country across all the states. And although it is a program where the women primarily are collectivizing and sort of gathering around to get income, livelihoods, and also talking about their linkages with banks, etc., the issue of gender still prevails. Despite having all this work for the last couple of years, the government and the NRLM felt that if until and unless they start addressing the gender issues, the gender dimensions, the work of this whole, the whole structure is also not moving and things are not progressing. That's why at that point of time, we were brought in and we were started helping the NRLM structure to start addressing gender across. So we started off in four pilot states at the start. Was Odisha, and Jharkhand, Odisha, Jharkhand, MP, and Chhattisgarh. So in these four states, we started them. And as we started the work in 2019, the issue of baselines and various studies came up for the pilot phase. The idea was that we would have a 2-year pilot phase, and then we would move on to extend 3 to 5 years, as a scale of things. So the idea of baselines and having studies done, research done to understand the situation came up. And as this whole came up, we were just launched the various studies, two one quantitative studies and 2 qualitative studies we launched. We were hit by COVID. Next slide, Rashmi. Rashmi, next slide. Yeah. So the whole thing, the whole structure of the presentation will talk about the objective and strategy about the GAP, the research objective and the methodology and key learnings. And when I say key learnings, there are 2 types of learnings which I will share. One is doing studies / baseline / research during COVID times. That's a huge learning for us. I have not gone through after 24 years of working such complexity and understanding to do a study. And also, what are the findings of the study? I will share the 2 types of learnings which I will share. Next slide, Rashmi. So the gender justice program, which I was talking about across the 4 states which we are doing it, is basically a 3-pronged, where we are talking about feminist leadership development, institutional standing, and gender mainstreaming. In feminist leadership, we are talking about leadership at the grassroots level, where the gender point person, some capacities and all they are built up. Capacity building is done. A lot of capacities are inputted within the different structures, district level, block level, and at different places. Institutional strengthening is making sure these institutions are integrated within the NRLM architecture, which means the CLFs and block, the BMUs talk about to them, the district monitoring units talk to them, support them. This whole institutional integration that we are talking about, strengthening the institution from the grassroots to the up. The second part is also the that's better. Yeah, and the second part was about gender mainstreaming. So now gender mainstreaming, although in NRLM there are various divisions within the programming area. So there is a financial inclusion division, there is farm division, there is a non-farm division, there is, there are divisions, and each division, although it's a national program, work inside. So they do not talk about gender across any of these programs, and gender is not integrated as part of their looking, part of their focus when they're doing this program. So although they work with 100%, nearly 100% with women only, gender doesn't figure out in any of their working, but they do not try to address gender or address norms, social norms, they don't address one. That was another challenge which was given to us, saying that, all right, how can you integrate gender within the NRLM and the SRLM architecture, which means training people, building capacities within the program team and across the country. And when I say across the country, the NRLM structure is quite huge and quite significant with. And also we have to understand the way our country is structured is because NRLM is a national program, but the SRLMs are under the Ministry of Departments of Rural Development at the state level, which in a federal structure means rural development is a state subject, which means they have a greater say in how they run their own SRLM. So not all SRLM, although there is a guideline framework to do the work, but there is still a lot of independence or nuances in each of the states in their own program. Next slide. So we were largely on the qualitative study or the quantitative study, we were largely trying to address three key research questions. What strategies and processes are required that when we're doing this was to build capacities of the community resource persons, such as Samta Sakhis, and emerge as community leaders, how to strengthen the community institutions, such as the CLFs, how to mainstream gender in the capacity building IBCB pillar, which is called capacity building, and the institution building pillar, and the existing structures of rural livelihood missions in the various. So we had these key research questions. Based on that, we were trying to look at, talk to people across CLF, to the village organizations, to the SHGs, and across the 4 geographies. Also, we were also trying to do, our plan was to do 2 rounds of quantitative survey and 1 round of qualitative survey. Next slide. So we were when we started off in March of 2020, when we were starting off, we had this whole typical line of things. Whom do we want to reach out to through key interviews, FGDs, IDIs, and as the things progressed, then the online consultations came in, online participant observers came in, online in-person participant observers came in, then also telephonic calls happened all across them. And with each of these things, we had different sets of experiences, and each of them has its pros and cons of data collection and which affects the data in a certain manner and how we're talking about. So the next slide. So one of the big things which we learned during this whole process, because as the COVID hit, we were also taken in by a lot of surprise, not only surprise, but let's say very frankly to say that we were very ill prepared to even address a situation like this, because traditionally when we have to launch a survey, we all have done it. We straight away, do our questionnaire or the tools development, test the tools, hire a set of people, go out to the field, collect the data, be it quantitative, be it qualitative. You do that whole process. Once the data comes in, you analyze, put it across, process it, and you put the report out. That's a standard process. But here, the whole basis, the data collection got. And when we started looking around us, what are the standard protocols when a situation like this to look at data collection? Is it something, there is a go-to slide or a go-to booklet or a go-to handbook which we can go to utilize? That standard protocols, lack of standard protocols hit us. That there is nothing around in a very systematic manner which we can talk about or refer. So we started talking to different organizations who had a similar set of issues like a 3IE or a JPAL. We started talking to them to understand what they were doing and how they would want to address this as going ahead. And we were already in the first phase, and we are going through this whole first phase and the second phase. We were not able to kick off our data collection. Secondly, we also realized that we do not have organizations or data collection institutions with experience of remote data collection in rural areas or online platforms are very few. Now, that was also a bit of a, because most of the modalities, most of the digitization of the data collection has happened where they have now, this online platforms, which they take the tablets and they do the data collection. That's the online version. But remotely, that experience is not there for the rural area. Whereas in the urban areas, we could find certain agencies and organizations who were collecting the data through telephonic means or doing online surveys and stuff like that, which we could find platforms to do. So there is a gap area in the whole area of rural data collection on. The third thing which hit us also was, I'm talking because these are learnings from this whole COVID and the experiences of COVID. The third thing is the researcher training. Our researchers, I do not know, I may be wrong, but our researchers, although very good at looking at this form of, training people in questionnaire and all that thing. But when it came to online mode, there was a gap in their capacity. You could find it. Very few people had an experience of doing a complete research work on online. Very few people had the experience like that. So we had to quickly build up our own staff capacities. And that meant whenever there was a lockdown where people could not meet, everything had to be online. During that phase, we had to quickly understand that there is a lack of capacity and that our own researchers needed trainings on that, how to build up the capacity of doing online stuff. That was one. The fourth point which happened, hit us was also the data collectors, the training in asking, gathering, handling technology. And because whatever the data collectors are going to ask on how they ask, when you are doing a face-to-face interview, like you're going to a woman's house in her own setting, sitting in her house, sitting in the village, getting a quiet place, the confidentiality issue, the safe place where she can talk about things, she can talk about the gender-based violence issue. It's much more easier when you're doing it face-to-face because there is a what you call rapport you build up with between the respondent and the interview. That rapport building does not, I should not say does not exist, but it exists in a very limited manner when you're doing online and trying to get an online interview done or an online process. The challenge, the next bit was about the technology. So all different, we looked at different technologies of recording, of different technologies of analyzing and looking at how to handling the technology. So this did require time, resources, and the cost at times became prohibitive for us to do. What examples we could see in the West when we try to bring it here in our Indian context and that in the rural setting does have an issue, and that issue of cost and time and all those things becomes prohibitive. The other issue which came up during when we were talking about that was the issue of ethics, the ethical issue, confidentiality, consent, and how do we all gather that and be safe when we are doing survey, or if the person is sharing to us, how do we address it and how do we be on the right side of things? Not, doesn't mean that as already in the outer environment, there is so much of uncertainty and so much of deaths and everybody is going through this whole turmoil. And within that turmoil, we should not be adding on or harming the respondent in any way. So that confidentiality issues were a challenge in how to address it. Another bit was about addressing biases. So if I am reaching out to someone who has a connectivity or maybe a mobile phone, and then there is I will be in my survey or in my data gathering or in my data collection process, I will be tending to bias towards people who are already have a connection, because automatically the people who are not having a connection or hard to reach will automatically get pushed out from the process. And that was a difficult issue in the rural areas because you understand the issue of caste and the economic issues around it, and the complex issues around caste and economics is a difficult combination, becomes a difficult combo when you say addressing. So we were worried about it, and we were also, I do not know if we were 100% successful in addressing these two issues about people with connectivity, without connectivity, and addressing the different biases 100%. Because if you look when you are doing a face-to-face survey, you go to a village, you understand the layout of the village, you in your survey quotas, you talk to different caste communities in a manner, in certain way that everybody's views are incorporated. But in this case, when you are on remote and trying to do remote things remotely, it becomes tough to get this, address these biases and people being left out. And when we were doing the first day of the sessions in COE, the inaugural session, Marco talked about not leaving the last one behind, talked about that principle. And here, I think it was tested to the maximum, where we were always worried that if we have left out people and we could have been good part of the survey or the part of the study, we're not being. The other point is about mobiles. We used a lot of mobiles during one of the 2 phases of quantitative survey when we did. And we quickly realized that mobiles in rural areas tend to be family assets, not individual assets, like in more urban areas. I own a phone, my wife maybe owns a phone, children own a phone. but it is more of a family asset in the rural area. And the control of the family asset, the ownership of the family asset tend to be with the male person. Or if the woman has an ownership of the phone or the mobile device, the device he or she is using tend to become, of the nature of lower version, not the smart devices. And the third way was the sample base. How do you convert these calls into successful calls? Because we had the, the woman would stop call and discussing in between and move on to doing something, and we had to break the call of it, come back again. So that was an issue. Language, again, a huge issue in addressing. So these are the couple of type of things which we were challenges which we were finding around when we were doing service during the COVID, and this was a learning of how to address it and when we do any other things. Having said that, we collected a lot of good data, and I will just finish because I know my time limit will be over with just one slide. Just the next slide over here. Yeah. So just I will stop and key findings and stop. So we could do, despite all that, we were able to collect a very rich set of data. And using that rich set of data, we were able to a lot of do this policy tweakings which we do. And one of the good things which the government came back and told to us at one point of time, that we were the only agency we were out there, with the women group members and the SNG members, trying to understand what was going on in the life, and were quickly feeding on to. And we were able to make lot of progress in the policy side based on these data which we collected, and make the changes in the programming which would affect at the individual level, at the institutional level, and the systemic level. And we have followed it up with a number of trainings and later on things with that. Thank you, Rashmi. I will stop at that. We can't hear you, Rashmi.
You are muted, Rashmi.
Thank you, Aniruddha, for an excellent presentation and bringing out how the gender justice program adopted a multi-level holistic approach for integrating gender and achieving the outcomes. I wish we could see your other slides as well, but you have very nicely detailed the difficulties and what are the learnings from your project while conducting the evaluation. Thank you very much. We will come back to you, and at that time you can give some of your slides again. You have very nice slides. So now I would like to invite Mr. Ray Kancharla. He is a strategic planner, master training and professional evaluator who has worked with several organizations, including SARC initiatives. I welcome you, Mr. Ray. His topic of the day is very interesting: children and youth as future evaluators. So I welcome you once again, and over to you.
Thank you, Rashmi, and thank you to the two colleagues who have shared brilliantly their experiences, both Ratna and Aniruddha. Congratulations first to the team. Yeah. So you can move to the next slide. Yeah. Good. I have given it a title like this. It may sound as utopia, but I believe in it personally. And then my focus for this sharing is about how can we begin to nurture and groom children and youth. This is actually the point that I'm trying to make after being engaged with child rights programming for nearly 2 decades, I would say. Yeah, please move to the next slide. Yeah. Before I touch upon the 2 points that I have put there in the slide, I want to place here 2-3 frameworks that I have by design did not mention, not to complicate it there, but however would like to mention 2-3 issues when I put it in the chat box. One is called AAP. By AAP, I do not mean Aam Aadmi Party, but accountability to the affected population. This is very important when we are talking of experience of evaluations, assessments, and learnings in crisis situations. Because basically, the humanitarian crisis domain is something that moves very quickly. And it's very important that from day one, we front load this point that we need to be accountable to the affected communities, the population. And when we say accountable, there are some very interesting frameworks that have emerged in the last 5 to 7 years. And one of them is called the core humanitarian standards. There are 9 principles there, and each one of them is like a dynamite, and that can help the implementers and evaluators to be on board much ahead of time and not at the end of the event. And there are very important aspects, but 3 of them can be looked at in 3 keywords. One is gender, second is protection, and third is diversity. And with age-specific approaches, because a child of 1 to 5 years or a human person of 60 to 65 years, sometimes in our relief and recovery, rehab interventions, we bulldoze them. We think we are doing everything that is best. But it is very important to become self-critical and self-analytical in this. That's why I believe all evaluations are, I use a riddle when I do evaluations. See the fish, seeing you, seeing it. See the fish, seeing you, seeing it. And when I work with that lens, there is so much to learn and unlearn and relearn for the future of evaluations. Existing frameworks, of course, there's so much work done in this sector, and there are huge learnings that have come, and we will never exhaust them to go through all of them. Nobody can read all of them, but there's so much out there. But however, this specific approach that I am looking at is probably, it's a little bit middle of the road, not much tempered. Sometimes it acts as a block for many. So I would like to see this as an important choice for future. Please move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, we do real time, we do midterm, we do end term. And they're very context specific, very situation specific, especially when we talk of crisis situations. You take of conflict, the conflict grammar, the texture, the ethos, everything is very different. In fact, you cannot get access very often. In a non-accessible zone, how do we mount evaluations or even front load them if possible? Whereas nature-induced crisis, we have a little more of. Yeah, COVID, of course, is a very different texture and genre of crisis. But there are small to big, etc. So sometimes we see evaluation as the last thing in the cycle of things that happen. If we can change it, for me, full spectrum evaluation would start much before. But there are challenges though. Yeah, but we are caught between, evaluations which are meeting the standards of the donors. But there is also a different line of commitment evaluation that we can look at. Yeah, please move to the next slide. Okay, having been involved in this child rights program, we used to do child-centered humanitarian action and child-centered resilience action. I was very glad to hear Ratnaji's points on resilience. And personally, I was also involved in Law to Red from, I think, second week or third week. And I accompanied it for 2 years. And I was especially following one family who have lost 8 children and how they revived their life and became slowly resilient. I did accompany that family for 2 years. I used to visit them every 2 months. Now, there are exercises that we do in our accompaniment with people and evaluations, etc. And I was using very strongly a media lens at that time. I do believe that there is a lot that we can continue to innovate. And when I talk of children and youth becoming part of it, I see this as a venture new capital approach. Because I want to remind you something from the popular media. Chennai Express, there is one statement that Shah Rukh Khan makes very often. Do not underestimate the power of a common man or common person. Now, I would like to repeat that for the sake of children and youth. Children have been very surprising, and the youth, and when they interfaced with the state authorities, especially disaster management authorities at state and national level, they have actually stunned them with a kind of knowledge, practice, approach, and that concept of see the fish seeing you, seeing it. They have really been a surprise. And Article 12 of UNCRC, and there are many other articles inside, they're very clear how children's voices need to be heard, not as a tokenistic measure, but in a very deep measure. So my line for today as a profound request to all evaluators and those who are listening to this is, can we not make space to ensure that their voices are considered, filtered, and captured in lead roles? For me, that's a very important take, that if the organizers and all the evaluators working from now to future could take it on. Please move to the next slide. Yes. Now, there was an Asian effort done, and I was part of that somewhere 1 or 2 years before COVID struck us. Now, there we gathered children from different parts of India and also from neighboring nations, Nepal, Bangladesh, etc. And there we discovered that, again, the same conviction. If you really put them into the spot and give a little capacity, they stun the world. And I've seen that. In 2015, I remember from Mumbai slums, we worked for 2 years with this young girl, and she reached New York and literally took by surprise more than 50 presidents, ministers at the event of SDGs promulgation on September 25th, 2015. This is where I believe the trust and entrust things to children and youth. There will be a lot of surprise and there will be a lot of change, and put them in the front line. So my ask in this whole business of evaluation is, how can we make space where seniors, experienced evaluators can nurture, mentor, and grow children and youth as future evaluators? In fact, there is a film recently out. I can send the link to many of you. It is called The Letter. And there, Ridhima Pandey, who from Haridwar, is one of the advocates in the area looking at climate change and how can we look at climate change issues in the near future and long-term future. She's a real living person. She's only a young lady of less than 20 years. But one like that, she can actually help us to see the world in a different way. And she has got a very critical lens of things that are going on. So that critical consciousness is something that I see which young people can bring to us. Please move to the next slide. Yeah. Now, the next gen evaluators, that's my take. How can they help us to reshape this field of inquiry? I do believe there are challenges. Nowhere we have a life or a context without challenges. But the other side is, are we ready to give it a chance? So this is something that I have been reading and rereading the works of Paulo Freire, who has worked in Brazil as an educator. And in his work, he evaluated the whole education sector very differently and merited exile. But however, he was called back and he became the Minister of Education in the same country. So there is an engagement that as evaluators, we need to be ready to take some risk. And again, the word codification is very important. We do codify an action at the beginning, but the new codification has to happen after the action is in progress and towards the end of it, not after that. So there is much to learn from, and I am a strong believer of that. Yeah, please move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is my one and only ask in the sharing, and thank you for being there to listen to this. Now consider next gen as future evaluators in reshaping our world and the future of evaluation itself. In fact, yesterday I had two youth who have come from Orissa and they were in India Habitat Center, and they spoke to an audience of about 200 people. They're 10 to 11 years of experience, and they really surprised the whole group. And I am able to strengthen my faith and trust in the fact that youth need to be our future evaluators. Thank you, Rashmi ji.
Thank you, Ray. Very appropriately, you have used the term middle of the road evaluators for upcoming evaluators. The future of evaluations, no doubt, rests upon them. And we need to groom them from the very beginning. Our next speaker of the day is Sanchita Ghosh, who will focus upon accountability and inclusion. Sanchita is gender and evaluation specialist working on issues like violence against women, monitoring and evaluation, etc. She has worked with various bilateral and multilateral agencies like USAID, UN organizations, NGOs, and presently working with Oxfam. I welcome you, Sanchita. Over to you.
Thank you, Rashmi, and thank you our co-panelists who actually gave very, detailed understanding of challenges during the COVID era and the evaluation specific, learnings. Those are really important. I was really very happy to, go through all the presentations. Yes, when we do acknowledge that during the COVID era, lot of challenges happened in world, not only in India. But those challenges also give us some learning, especially in our area of work, as you all know. Rashmi, can you please move to the next slide? Yeah, and the next slide. Yes, where we actually, evaluate our own humanitarian actions for which Oxfam India, as part of all Oxfam affiliates, are known for. This particular area, is very challenging and learning scope of having full of scope of learning, because we know that evaluating any other programs are much more different than evaluating the humanitarian actions, and especially during the COVID era. We all know, I mean, Anirudh was earlier engaged with Oxfam, has extensive experience in collaborative design and implementing any evaluation methodology, focusing the OECD DSE criteria for response program, humanitarian response program, worldwide and also in India. I will today specifically focus on some activities that we have taken up for the during the COVID era. What kind of programs we conducted, and how we actually evaluated those programs. Also, some learning and challenges and learning that will help us in designing our future programs and evaluation strategies. Next slide, please. We all know that the sudden outbreak actually, and the huge wave or this pandemic affected every person in world in last 3 years. And of course, in the intervention strategies, people have adopted many methodologies, as well as in the evaluation strategies, people adopted many methodologies to actually overcome the challenges, because we, as we do in other traditional evaluations, like going to the field, conducting interviews with participants, were not actually possible in this time. Many adopted the virtual interview method, or self-evaluation method, or community monitoring and evaluation method at the places where there was less point of contact, which could prevent the COVID infections. Um, what happened in Oxfam's area work, a lot of families actually face challenges, and with factories and workplaces shut down, millions of migrant workers had to deal with loss of income, food shortages, and uncertainty about their future. Also, that actually guided us when we provided food kit, shelter kit to the people who are affected by, on the one hand, COVID, and on the other hand, any other disaster event in their life. Rashmi, next slide, please. I would like to share some experiences from our evaluation of COVID response mission Sanjeevani and PSP, that is protect, secure, and preserve. That intervention were taken up during the COVID era, and then we provided, as I mentioned earlier, food kit, shelter kit, and other wash and unconditional cash transfers to the women, to deal with the challenges in their everyday life. But what we faced as a team of evaluators, as a team at Oxfam India, like, we really didn't have a proper baseline. That always been a challenge for evaluating any humanitarian action, because it's very spontaneous, and we, most of the time, we have to do a real time evaluation in such cases. That's a big challenge to actually show the impact. Also, like, by rapid change in the circumstances, that make a context difficult to be sure of later, and also the assumptions about normal social and physical conditions may no longer be justified in the area that we work. On the other hand, difficult to collect need assessment data, as I also mentioned earlier, that in absence of any baseline data, it was a real challenge for Oxfam India team to conduct any evaluation during that time, especially the humanitarian actions. So what we tried and tested, like, different methods, different criteria. We built the capacities of the team internally and externally, because at that time we used to work with the partner organizations at different places in 16 states that were under our humanitarian action intervention. And also, we had a strong focus on gender lens and social inclusion and safeguarding principles based on our mission and vision of Oxfam India. We tried to reach during our evaluation time to the areas where, like, single women or marginalized populations are there. Of course, like in humanitarian action, we generally don't consider any discriminations, but where the resources are not reaching, or the people are not able to access food kit or shelter, we have to take some methods to actually reach there, and to evaluate if we have reached there or not. These two things are really important. Rashmi, next slide, please. So these were overall, methodology of evaluation of our PSP, Protect, Secure, Preserve program, where we actually tried and tested lot of, just a minute, because I'm not able to see. Okay, so tried and tested like a very quick literature review of what has happened and what has other humanitarian action organizations are doing in the area to evaluate the processes. And then we prepared a tool in a very quick manner, and not always following, the traditional evaluation practices, but at least to get some data online or offline from the field. Next slide, Rashmi. As I said, that we have used a lot of offline tools and as well as online tools, because many areas we couldn't reach also for evaluating the programs. We actually used, I would like to mention here, a critical tool actually devised by Oxfam India to provide access to information, which is known as Adhikarvani, and providing an interface between government and all civil society organizations and the end beneficiaries. And this aimed to improve the access to critical information to the targeted population. In the absence, as I said earlier, also in the absence of any traditional evaluation methodology, we used some of these techniques to get the feedback from our beneficiaries or the people we were working for, to understand our quality of food distribution or our quality of whole interventions during that time. This Adhikar Vani, is actually included, involved with the audio message and text messages with all different vernacular mediums in all 16 states. And it also connected the people who have been left behind in development and with the government schemes that were really important, to connect them with the government schemes and expand their reach. The target group also, elected by the panchayat representatives, so that no one is left behind. And also citizen science volunteers. This was another interesting, involvement that we had from the local people, a group of people who were actually volunteers, and they had their everyday monitoring guidelines, self-evaluating guidelines with them, and they could actually help in post-distribution monitoring, and at post-distribution monitoring, like whatever food kit and shelters, whatever things we provide to people, we just monitor our quality of the services and accountability, which is really important. As an outcome of this Adhikar Vani, citizens actually had been able to, use the informations gathered to receive the benefits of different social schemes with support from CSOs, and how these schemes were accessed by them, what are the quality of calls that they received during accessing the services, and how these schemes helped them. So to understand these things, this Adhikar Vani actually helped us in reaching to people. We also used, like beneficiary list prepared by the partner organizations and the citizen science volunteers. Our staffs also were present in some distribution drives. The quality of items were checked by the staffs during the packaging and handover notes to the hospitals, which were kept very religiously with the team that actually provided the services. We also had case studies that were collected. Interesting to say here that from within the community, that how these emergency services provided to them helped actually to overcome the challenges, and the stress situation at that time. We also had, master roles that which were filled for each of the distribution sites, And then in the master roles, the phone numbers of the beneficiaries also provided in some cases, to avoid any kind of challenges or gaps in distributing the services, and to ensure that every people we wanted to reach, actually we could reach. That was really important. And also from the phone numbers we collected, random calls were made to check if they received the required materials or not. That was really important for our post distribution monitoring during the time. We also had beneficiary cards for unconditional cash transfer and ration distribution, given to each households in the states, and these used to keep track of individuals beneficiaries who have been supported through this UCT drive, and including the amount, mode of payment, endorsement of relevant authorities. So all these informations were actually collected during the evaluation of the during the distribution of the material, and all these cards actually evaluated during the evaluation of PSP. We also tried to ensure that excuse me, ensure that at least we have enough the humanitarian indicator tool in our evaluation design, and also the methodology of self evaluation, which actually facilitated in the community that I mentioned earlier. Rashmi, can you change the next slide? As I said in the beginning, that we had a lot of challenges during the distribution of materials, as well as during the evaluations, because we wanted to ensure that we are reaching out to our most vulnerable communities, single woman-headed households, and then persons with disabilities and the marginalized population. Where generally, what happened when we get the informations from the panchayat head, some areas might have left during the need assessment, and we had made a lot of effort and attempt to again go to the field and ensure that are all these beneficiaries included in our sample, in our distribution of materials or not. And to make sure that during the humanitarian crisis, at the time of COVID, because we all know that a lot of there are three cyclone has happened and flood has happened in the states of Kerala, West Bengal, Assam, and other places. So how to make to reach the accountability mechanism for the services that we deliver during that time, to focus on women and girls need into that. We also were very religiously actually stick to that framework. We also had gender segregated data to see are we really able to reach to at least more than 80% of the women or not, and are we really able to reach to our the households which are headed by women, and households which are having single women, because most of the time in panchayats beneficiary list it gets missed. So we our effort were always to stick to the guidelines, stick to the measures that actually ensure that we are reaching to the people who are in need, who are in most need of that. Yes, in doing that, we have quite a lot, interesting learning, which we also, ensured that our future program actually could be guided by those learnings, like involving more local partners and communities, especially women, sensitizing donor to understand the criticality of data during the pandemic, because we had a lot of CSR projects during that time. There are those who helped us in our intervention, and also, and wanted a donor report based on the interventions, and then which actually helped us in showcasing our success and achievement, and also challenges that from where we learned a lot. Relying on existing database and other informations, and seeking support from other organizations working on similar issues to strengthen their relief work were actually helped us. And we currently also we are planning to make a network of organizations that are involved in the relief work, and how they do more structured evaluations during pandemic or during any epidemic or any other stress situations. We are currently involved in that. And I think with this, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Sanchita, and putting forward several interesting issues. And one of these I really liked about how you could overcome the problems in data collection during COVID time. And you have used several important tools, like especially the humanitarian indicator tool. And I will be happy if you could share it with some of us, and you could give some link of that. It's quite interesting. And you could also reach to the last mile, which is very important in data collection when you are there for during such pandemics or in some crisis situation. So before I go opening the floor, I would like to request to Aniruddha. He mentioned about the 3 levels of changes, I mean, impact of his program. And if you could explain a little bit more, we have still 5-10 minutes left before we open the question floor for that. And so I would request Aniruddha to give what is the future of this program, what kind of future research he is likely to do with that individual level, institutional level, etc. He explained just now. So over to you, Aniruddha, and I will stop sharing this PPT now. I think, or you want your slides?
Just show me the slide.
Okay, I will go to your slides and
I will speak on a couple of things.
Yes, yes. You were on this slide earlier.
Just let's stay there. Let's stay there.
Okay. Yeah. So you have 5 minutes, Aniruddha.
Okay. So I'll just quickly add on to the level, institution level, and systemic.
Yeah.
At the individual level, what happened with the gender training programs actually happening with the SHG was the first time a lot of their understanding on the social acceptance about beating, violence, and all those things started getting broken. Secondly, the issue of because the COVID was there and the government at that point of time had asked for the SHG groups to be involved in the COVID response in a very big manner, which means they were involved in like making masks and sanitizers and stuff like that. A lot of economic activity, although very SHG based level, started happening, and the government started collecting those materials and purchasing those materials. So one, because of the COVID process, there was a lot of income, a bit of income was accruing to the families and the individual members. And that changed the game and on the top of that, the understanding of gender happened, and that changed the dynamics of the women groups and in their power to negotiate for rates, in their power to negotiate for the access to market, in their power to reach out to a different new sets of people. One. Second thing, it also happened that although when they started talking about it, they realized that although the woman is not talking about earning a bit of money, doing this work or getting involved more in Manrega work, wanting to look at Manrega, documents and trying to punch the cards and things like that. So the important part, they also realized they wanted the entitlement. So they started looking at, do I have an access to the land? Is the land rights an issue? Will my children, girl childs, go to school? So they started looking at entitlements and a lot of paperwork that in our country, be it urban areas or rural areas, need to access these schemes or understand these schemes of various government bodies. That entitlements or access to schemes, there was a huge upsurge of understanding that. One, it was driven by the economic factors of because of the downtime, because of the COVID, but there was also that this thing opened up, and this individual at the SHG level were starting getting it, and at the programmatic level we had to respond to catering to each of these needs and the demands being generated at the individual. The institution level, the CLFs were bodies where a number of SHGs confederate and become a CLF, say cluster level federation. Now, this cluster level federation bodies across 32,000 across the country, they for the first time also created a body which was Lok Adhikar Kendra, where they could where opened up the whole space of talking about rights, violence, entitlements. So they sort of opened up that, and that got established during this whole COVID phase that happened. And at the institution level, we were able to push a lot of agenda with the SHG groups. And it happened very organically and very, it happened from grass to bottoms up. And now today they are talking, their whole thing is government has now coming up with a whole resolution on gender rights centers in each of these CLF levels so that gender rights can be addressed in a very systematic manner across NRLM, across the different bodies. So we're already seeing that process happening. So NRLM being a MORD, Ministry of Rural Development, we are also converging with the WCD, so the one-stop center. So the convergence funnel is now being talked about in a very big manner between two ministries. And because it has happened, this institutional arrangement and thinking around to collaborate across ministries has come because of the push and the situations of COVID and the response to COVID and various aspects of how the response has happened. The third bit on the systemic level, and I will spend a minute on that, is the openness of the ministries in actually committing to openness of the ministry in committing to gender or signing up or saying that, all right, we as a national livelihoods program will commit to certain gender parameters. And this is our gender strategy paper and committing to certain gender parameters of the policy. Now, this has meant that a lot of, so we are writing at this point of time, we are writing the strategy paper, and that strategy paper is going to be adopted by this MORD ministry and the whole NRD. I think this is our commitments to the gender piece, gender commitments on this group. Budgetary commitment came, line items got separated, everything those are like happened. But this systemic changes did take place across, and the gender justice program and the case of Madhya Pradesh got extended to 18 districts. And now it is going to full scale. And at the national level, we are looking at 750 blocks to go up at the present moment through this gender resource centers at each of the blocks level, linking up to the one-stop centers. Combination of them. Thank you. I'll stop at.
So thank you very much, Anirudh, and I will stop sharing these slides now, and I will open the floor for taking some questions here. And before I go to the chat box where we have some questions, I have a question to Mr. Ray. He mentioned of that middle of road evaluators. So I wanted to know that what age he thinks that children should be roped into the evaluation system, and how he thinks he can be groomed to be a leader and the torch bearers in future. Over to you, Mr. Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Rashmi ji. You have hit the nail on the head, I must say, the point that I was trying to negotiate for. Yeah, I was actually part of some real-time evaluation of Oxfam. I actually led it in 2020. It happened during COVID time. So I went to the last mile across the crossing Brahmaputra, and I found so many children, adolescent girls especially, who received support, of course, but are willing to share and even critique the whole experience. And I use the same parameters which I was mentioning, which we use normally for the accountability to the affected population. There are 9 core humanitarian standards which is looking at the affected person, the recipient of the support, and we do not at all use the word called beneficiary in this. It's a very unfortunate word that we have, bought in for so long. And I felt they could actually be, some of them, excellent leaders. And if I knew this 2 months before, I would have made them co-evaluators with me and even shared my fee with them. I don't mind sharing that fee at that level. And for me, I felt there are many such opportunities which all the organizations are involved in responses, including the corporate sector. And so that is where I see adolescent girls, boys, starting from 15 could be very, very good age to nurture and grow this. And I have that trust because I was mentioning in my presentation the story of a young girl called Saleha Khan from Mumbai slums. You will not believe, in about 18 months to 2 years, she has become such a stunning star that when she went to New York as an ambassador of children, all the presidents, ambassadors, whoever listened to her wanted to have a photo with her, including the couple, Bill and Melinda Gates. And they have devised a program on menstrual hygiene with her. And along with their support, she is developing a strategy for menstrual hygiene in the slum girls. She has built her own group. She's making her own adolescent champions in this area. So this is where I believe that we cannot underestimate their capacities any longer. And now with the exposure to technology, they have even overtaken many adults in these areas. So this is where I believe that they need to be part of this, and evaluations with such groups must be front-loaded and not end-loaded. This would be my take on that. I hope I have responded to you, Rashmi. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ray. So here are some questions.
Can I add a point?
Yeah,
Rashmi,
please carry on.
Very welcome.
On the issue of real-time evaluations, I remember when we were framing that in 2012, the first time when we framed with Vivian and me and all those together to real-time evaluations, it was such a learning experience because it was completely different we had before that. So when we started feeding, so the word, again, there is a whole, we called it real-time evaluation. It got popularized because of that. It went up to NLAP and got involved in the whole process, accepted and fine. Then there was a lot of feedback to us which came. I think you should take that and understand. I don't know what has happened on that one, but there was feedback on the use of the word evaluation in that overview. So real time, is it an evaluation or an assessment or a feedback loop into programming? And because we have categories in category 1, category 2, category 3, type of categorization, we have this whole process. So there was this whole discussion. I do not know if it has collapsed on and off. I try to follow that, but I don't think that whole thing has closed in a manner which people popularly it's called real-time evaluation. But it is, if you now I look at it, is not an evaluation, but a good ground assessment tool of the ground situation. I would give.
Yeah, one line from me.
Yeah,
we call it RTR, Anirudh now. Real-time.
RTR, okay.
Yeah,
good.
It has an undercurrent transformation now. So real-time review gives us an opportunity to do mid-course corrections.
I know. I have been designing. I designed.
Re-navigate.
The design. I know.
Thank you.
The second part on the issue of benefit, I think that is a very good point you picked up on the beneficiaries. I think in Oxfam it is called people, quote unquote. It is called people reached, and it is not called beneficiaries anymore. And across the board, I think it is still that needs to be pushed and popularized, that we can't call people beneficiaries, and they are people with heart and mind and soul, and they cannot be called beneficiaries, although in difficult situations. Definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Anirudh. Sorry, just to respond, we do follow that. Yeah, but currently we had to change some strategies, and you all know what is happening with us. So we have to use these words now to, but otherwise we definitely stick to the international framework of calling these terms. But we had to change something, and that's why we made the presentation in that way. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Now I will take a question from Prithvi. He has a question for Ratna as well as for Anirudh. So he writes that, Ratna, I agree with all of your top insights, especially with technology providing barriers during crisis. Generally, there is a hesitation amongst the evaluation community to do leaner telephonic based surveys, although they are less extractive and feed faster into decision making. What is your view on this? Ratna, over to you.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very difficult to disagree with this. I think, the technology has given us a lot of flexibility. And during COVID, I myself was involved, with SSP, and more than 1,000 women were trained during this time to use Google Forms, to use a lot of technology, to use Zooms. And I think it made a lot of difference to the kind of interactivity that we were able to build. Having said that, I would still, place a caution on the nature of the technology, which is still top down and which still requires a lot of curating, by intermediaries. And I think that's where we have to kind of, invest a lot in building partnerships among evaluators, because every donor wants an evaluation. Every government system is looking for its data. All of us, the networks are looking for our data. So there is a danger of kind of overloading the system and having multiple, and repetitive kind of data. So I would say that there is no shortcut to coordination, better coordination among all partners. I think that has to be done, and that is something which the community of evaluators, I think, can play that kind of a role, because it's very difficult to kind of overload people in the community who are going to fill your data. They're already responsible for, say, distributing relief kit to 3 lakh families, or things like that. So I would say that yes, yes to a lot of technology. I think it eases life, but also handle it carefully. Rashmi ji, can I just take a minute to kind of add to what Aniruddha and Sanchita were saying? People very much have become conditioned to consider themselves to be beneficiaries, particularly when they're dealing with the governance system. And this is why, we focus so much on gender empowerment, because the layers of patriarchal system, the layers of this feudal system are so deeply internalized that, even the NGO staff does not sometimes realize, how they are doing things. And Anirudh, my experience, just before I got involved with SSP was, spending almost 3 years with the NRLM in trying to include health, nutrition, and social inclusion in their systems. And so the perspectives are very different, so when you go and actually work with the women, they say, we'll do it, you just let us do it, aap karwa ke to dekhiye humse, so I think we don't give enough credence to their managerial ability. We are not putting them in those decision making positions enough. And when we tried it over a 3-year period, in SSP, covering 1.5 lakh women, it made such a lot of difference. And you saw from the data, how many of those community leaders who had just come in for the first time during COVID into public domain and dealing with government people and dealing with such a terrible disaster, with all those migrant families, the food insecurity and things like that. The way they dealt with it, all the solutions came locally. So I think the last point, Rashmiji, which I want to highlight here is that rural communities are not homogeneous, They are already dealing with so many disasters, which we don't cover in our various thematic projects. So हम अपने sector को लेके बैठ जाते हैं, and we are not looking at, the entire life experience which the rural communities are facing. So how do we help in bringing that together? Which is why any time you do a disaster response, never lose sight of the long-term impact that you're having with every action. I think never lose sight that with every step that you're taking, whether it is in relief distribution, who are the decision makers? Are people having enough voice? Because the way the women are able to say, do a need assessments, how do they look at the damages? How are they looking at the needs of the migrants or of the landless workers? I think that there are a lot of local solutions, which they are themselves able to bring out. And I'll just end with one phrase, which has become very popular in Swayam Shikshan Prayog's women leaders, which is कि हम मिनी SSP बन गए हैं, हम अब मिनी SSP चलाएंगे और यहाँ पे, and this is where that ability, that confidence of women's empowerment comes in, and this is where I feel that we should never lose sight of that. And I really loved what Ray's mentioned about the youth being the future evaluators. They're not only the future evaluators, they're the policy makers, for heaven's sake, so we have to invest in them. Thank you.
Very true, Ratna, and thank you very much for your detailed answering the question. Prithvi also has a question for Aniruddha. She says that great point about mobile being family asset. Was this true for certain types or all types of respondents? How do you think we can overcome this challenge while going remote studies or evaluations? Aniruddha.
So the mobile, although the mobile ownership has increased over the years across the country, but I am saying from what I have a little bit seen because of these 3-4 studies which has come in, is that one, there is a caste angle to the ownership also. So the higher the caste, the greater chances of owning an asset. The higher the caste, there are greater chance of families owning number of assets of mobile. I'm just talking of mobile. So a number of mobile, and people, and the woman might have a mobile directly to herself. So that is there. So there is a correlation. Tribal areas, the penetration is very, very low. So because we were doing the same study in Chhattisgarh and parts of Madhya Pradesh where the tribal belt, so there was the issue of hardly any mobile penetration. And if the mobile was there, it was those, not those phones, but the other versions of, and other versions of phones, which were, very difficult to reach and stuff like that. One point. Another insight in the whole phone business is the numbers change very frequently in the rural areas. So remember that. And so a person goes through 4 to 5 numbers every year. Not like us, that we have a phone number and or Sanchita's phone or Rashmiji's phone, I know, for 15 years is the same. So that is not the case. In rural areas, the phone numbers change frequently. And if you ask a probe a question why it does, because they have taken money from different lenders at different, when the money lenders or the people who they have returned money start chasing them to change the phone, to get a breather of some time to, manage that. That is another issue which happens, right? Which is a reality, lived reality in that space. Now, the question of reaching them is we have evolved a situation where we have learned and evolved. I'm not saying this is also 100% right or correct, but we have come to a situation that one, we gather the phone numbers first. So now once we gather the phone number first, there is a way of gathering where we take care of different disparities in the existing society in the gathering of the phone numbers. So if we do have to do 10, we take 40 phone numbers from that place if we can, sort of things, to have that base of the phone. Second thing we have also done is that, so we have a larger pool of getting people involved. Second thing, we have established a protocol of what calling would mean. So the consent would mean consent can be done online also, on the phone also. So we can give her a SMS and then we can get a consent from the survey to go ahead. We have done all that business also. But going ahead, what we have also done is a call can be interrupted at any point by the respondent any point of time, he or she is uncomfortable. And we can resume the survey later on, come back to this. Each number is called for 7 times before we say that there is no response. Or so there are different protocols we have established saying that if you follow these protocols, we get better results. And it has evolved because of this whole process. Secondly, we have also evolved a process where we have recorded the process. I talked about language. In the 4 states where we were, 3 states at least where we were working in, Hindi was the primary language, right? Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, primary language is thought to be Hindi. And Odisha was Odia, that's fine. But these thought to be fine. But the local dialects and the nuances of Hindi are completely different. And that's where I think when we had the face-to-face survey process, people, they would speak those languages and talk to them, right? But the people sitting in, say, Delhi calling team doesn't have that nuance of the language. So language is an issue which we need to take care when we are talking about it. The challenges are there, and you have to train a team to understand what those words mean in that certain language and what does it reference to, right? So we had a glossary developed, trained the team to understand, unpack those words when the respondents are people. So it was completely a learning phase. We learned as we went. We made huge number of mistakes as we went. I have no panelists to talk about it. We made mistakes as we went, and certain studies, certain questions, we didn't get good response just because of the mistakes we made in asking this question. So that was all a learning process which has been there.
So at this juncture, I will come to Sanchita, to you. This digital technology and data collection, use of mobile, etc., puts a lot of challenge as we are discussing. But how these ethical things are maintained in this kind of thing? You never know that whose mobile number is there, who was your sample, and who is answering. So, anybody of the panelists can comment on this, but first I will go to Sanchita.
Can I come in here, Rashmi ji?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, please. Sure.
Yeah. So I would say that, this is the
Ratna ji, I will come to you a little later.
Okay.
Let Sanchita speak
All
first,
right.
and then you please come. Sanchita, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a real challenge in real-time evaluation. And another concern that I wanted to mention here, in many rural areas, women actually do not have access to the mobile phone because of the structural inequality. So what we found that when we are calling some persons and who are calling to these people to get information were actually sometime for us it was miscellaneous and leading to another direction. Then we face the challenge of, okay, did we really take consent of that person to share the information that they received or not? That was another challenge. Then what we found that even during the digital survey also, we should actually use a consent form, short consent form to that people that we are calling. We were sending that in the SMS to that person. It is a real challenge. I don't think that methodologically it is very much under the ethical principles, but we had to do. We had no choice of that, because without consent asking some things from a person or participant were really against the thing. But we just followed this in some of the cases, but where there are network problems or network issues, and that person is not maybe don't want to share their consent, or don't not able to write. Also, in some cases, we really did not have any consent detail from them. But that was a challenge for us. Also, we are still struggling to get how, if some of you can help us, how to get, get rid of these ethical principles, maintaining ethical principles during any survey, or any evaluations that we conduct. Yeah, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sanchita. Ratnaji, yeah, please.
Actually, I was trying to add a slightly different dimension here, just to take forward what Sanchita was saying. I think one of the other very fundamental shifts, because of the unprecedented nature of the COVID crisis, because of the lack of mobility and the dependence on technology for communication, I think what shifted was that the entire relationship between a donor and a grantee, between the managers and the so-called beneficiaries. I think that is something we have to capitalize on much more. And I'll just share a very small experience here that, earlier, for example, in SSP, the donors would come for an assessment visit on a 6 monthly basis or an annual basis. But now there are monthly meetings. In some cases, there are weekly meetings in which layers of leaders, layers of community members are interacting, in a way that they never did earlier. And what the team is kind of saying is that earlier, it was all our accountability, what we did with the project, what we did with the funding, what we did with the outputs and the outcomes. Now it's a shared responsibility because we have co-created the design. We have co-created the way things are being done. So, the accountability framework also shifts. And I feel that this is a real area that evaluators as well as policymakers can really take up in a very serious way. And particularly because the entire landscape of the development sector is shifting so much due to the nature of government monitoring. And, there is an opportunity for, building higher accountability from all sides. And we really need that. We need that transparency. We need absolutely perfect due diligence and, financial management and every part of, what we do. Thank you.
Any key message from you, Ray? Last word from you.
Okay, my key message is something that we have been, talking about. See, the evaluation field is definitely a constantly learning ground, and we can never depart from it. But the new aspect that I think we can very clearly demonstrate is how we are willing to unlearn and relearn. And while doing that, how can we take on trust and entrust the next generation evaluators? And from very early, not too late. Yeah, this would be my submission. Yeah.
Anirudh, from you, the last word, and also you can comment on this ethical issue because you also mentioned in your presentation about this ethical thing and use of technology.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is to understand, when ethical issues during doing studies, surveys, research, whatever, data collection, whatever, it's paramount. I think if we do not do that, then we are doing more harm in the community, might be doing more harm in the community if we are not careful. And that is, I think, a paramount principle. And during this COVID phase, when we did these studies, the importance of it suddenly came up much more than it was earlier, if ever felt. Earlier, it was very, all right, we have to do X, Y. It was more of a routine. We have to go to IRB, get a clearance, IRB questions will come. routine. From a routine, it became paramount, and that shift happened. And now the way we are looking at each of the studies in a different lens altogether. We do not do any harm, the ethical lens, they are much more stronger pieces now and as we go now. And that has been one of the greatest learning on the pieces during these COVID times. The last bit, I think I just want to add to this whole discussion is uh, COVID has thrown up immense amount of challenges, but it has shown a lot of opportunity and lot of learnings can be. I think there is a chance and a scope, and I think it's a call to action to the evaluators also to somehow bring together these varied learnings which are there. If with one place it is somewhere curated by the organizers or by some body, a professional body, curates these learnings, then it becomes a good go-to place to learn. And it doesn't need to be a very refereed journal type of piece, but experiences can be curated. That would become a lot of helpful for the practitioners of evaluations or the MLE teams in each of these organizations, data collector organizations, in a lot of people. There's a lot of varied use for it. If somebody can curate these experiences happening across, like Ratnaji's experience of party, where the people actually sitting in review meetings, participating, taking more ownership of programs. The various different, or the children being part of it. All these experiences, if they are curated at one place, then becomes a go-to place to learn and take forward. And then we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Because we had realized that we are also reinventing the wheel in our own place and other organizations being exactly the same. So no need to do that if there is somewhere to go to place to learn.
Sanchita, last word from you, and some people are also asking if you could share some of the reports or the work you and others have done. Is there any possibility that you could share those things? Sanchita?
Okay, yeah. I think last word already been on the chat box that how to decolonize the humanitarian action. I think a responsibility also lies on the evaluators for that. We need to keep in mind that everything can't be donor driven. Something should be actually, your perspective, values per organization really helps too. Yeah, that's the
Thank
message
you.
from me.
Ratna, last line from you. Now we are running out of time. So please. Ratna?
Yes, I'll just add one point, which is kind of very critical and which is based on the theme of this entire conclave, which is transformation and equity. I think whatever we do, whatever project we work on, whatever donor we work with, in the long run, we can never lose sight that we have to work towards universalizing access. We have to work towards building equity. And everything that we do when we design any evaluation, when we design any strategy or any program, that long-term thinking needs to be reflected there. And it requires slightly more effort from our part, because otherwise, so much of copy-paste material is available for doing things.
Yeah.
But COVID has given us a lot of new tools which we never had earlier. And I think all the speakers have shared that. And I think this is a very good opportunity. We are at the cusp of a huge change in the entire development sector. We are at the at a climate crisis. We are at a exclusion crisis. We are facing a lot of new forms of violence against women and children. And I think we need to be very constructive in our approaches and have that long-term vision in sight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I will just wrap up the session. I have noted down some takeaways of the session I would like to share with you all. So some of the takeaways I could identify during this very lively discussion. The technology results in innovative means of communications. There is a need to generate large-scale awareness and outreach with these. Technology like mobiles are key factors in ownership and use as well. But at the same time, we should be cautious about using these and how we are using it, and we should keep in mind the ethical issues, etc. Another thing I find that more effective use of participatory methods in evaluation can reduce biases and other unethical practices. So it should, the methodology we use should be more participatory. I mean, beneficiaries should not be only beneficiaries, they should be a part of the evaluation. There is a need for standard protocols so that in such kind of pandemic and crisis situations, there is some uniformity in organizing evaluations, and in this context, we should keep the local context in focus. Then to work upon developing community leadership is essential in gender training and mainstreaming, because every locality vary with the other. So very localized solutions are needed to deal with this. Next gen evaluators need to be nurtured and mentored. And I would like to tell all of you that very shortly ECOI is going to have a certificate course.
We lost your voice, Rashmi ji.
Hello, is the session over?
Now clear. Now it's clear. You can
Achha.
speak.
So I just wanted to tell to all that ECOI is very shortly going to introduce a certificate course in monitoring and evaluation, and that would be the real outcome of this session, that we need to nurture the students and the young community, and we are doing it in collaboration with Lady Irving College, which will be a regular feature, and we would like to mentor the youngs to come up to be a good evaluators. Then reaching the last mile and most vulnerable is extremely essential, and for that we have several kind of tools. So instead of reinventing the wheel, it is better that we share those tools amongst all of us, so that it could be adapted or replicability could be seen, that is possible, or otherwise it could be adaptable in the various situations. There are new tools and methodologies which need to be put in public domain. That is what I meant from my earlier comment. Maybe a kind of repository we could brought out after this discussion, because I found several good tools are in use, and we can reach the last mile also. We so many times we use this thing, how to reach the last mile and how to really go for the gender mainstreaming. So if these we could develop a kind of repository of these tools, that would be good. And most important, I find that this humanitarian tool, because mainly when we go for the impacts and see the change in the behaviors, etc., generally in the evaluation outline, we generally miss the impact indicators so far as the behavior change is concerned. So therefore, I find this humanitarian tool is very interesting, and let us see how it could be adapted to other situations as such. And with this, I would like to thank all the speakers for their excellent presentations, experience sharing and discussions, and all the participants who made this session so lively and interesting. I also thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to be a part of this conclave, and also the technical team. Somehow we could get into this session. We were having butterflies in our stomach as we were not able to join initially. So everything ends well, that ends well. So thank you once again. Thank you all.